queer people grow up with no LGBT representation with whom we can feel identified with. The Moonflower is a podcast devoted to all of those sapphic stories that give us representation in literature, cinema, and TV. Are you ready to undertake this sapphic trek with your host, Esther Jiménez? Let's go, lesbians!
Good morning, good evening, good night! How are you keeping? I hope all is going well. I apologize for taking such a long time on uploading a new episode of the podcast. Barcelona has me hypnotized, I swear. Before I get on track, I have to announce you that November is gonna be a very sapphic month because the third season of the L Word Generation Q is being released on the 18th of November, and the second season of The Sex Lives of College Girls is being released on the 17th of November at HBO Max. I am so happy that I am gonna get to watch two of my favorite series at the same time. So, as you may know, today is Halloween, and honestly, fall is one of my favorite seasons over the year because I'm in love with enchanted castles, mystical woods, sublime landscapes, the concept of witches, monsters, vampires, and all that those creatures may represent. This is why I have done a small compilation of horrific and sapphic recommendations so that you have something to read or to watch while you enjoy your Halloween. Some of these recommendations are already on the podcast in case you want to find more about them. Let's get into them. My first recommendation is the short story by the Irish author Sheridan Le Fanu, Carmilla. This book was published in 1872, and I am going to try to give you some historical and artistic context of this time because almost every ghost story, vampire story, and so come from this time, I swear. So this time is the Victorian era. Terrific. So, to begin with, we have to mention that these stories are the offspring of Romantic literature. By these stories, I mean Victorian stories. Romantic literature was born within a context of revolutions, the French Revolution and the American Revolutions. Citizens were fighting for democracy, freedom, and equality. Well, Romantic writers, escaping from the developed cities, spent their time in nature, writing about it, about the individualistic feeling of finding the truth, finding God in nature, in themselves. So well, Victorian literature drinks from this way of doing art, adapting to the new changing reality. This new changing reality, in concrete the English one during the 18th century and the 19th century, is characterized by industrialism, imperialism, and the rapid growth of cities. If during Romantic times life was fully rural, now life moves to the city. Therefore, lots of artists wanted to evade themselves from this new technologist reality in nature. Also, these artists, instead of looking back to the Roman and Greek old times, they look back to the chaotic medieval times. The reason for this is because even if Victorian era is believed to be the golden era in the UK, it was actually a time of contrast, disorder, chaos, crisis, and repression. This is why there is an image of a medieval castle in almost every artistic Gothic work. Also, this is when the novel was first recognized as a genre, and when finally, women start writing and start fighting for their rights. One of these powerful women was the amazing, wonderful Mary Shelley, who is believed to be the creator of science fiction with her wonderful Frankenstein. If you like Frankenstein, I really recommend you reading The Last Man. That book is amazing. But it doesn't have sapphic content. I'm sorry. So, within this chaotic, repressive, and constrained context is when Carmilla was written. Thank you, Sheridan Le Fanu. I am not going to talk about Dracula since I find it too misogynistic to read it. honestly, I have tried to read it so many times, but I can't. However, I know that there's some sapphic content in case you're interested in it. I don't know what's up with gothic writers and lesbian vampires. Well, in my opinion, there are so many writings about lesbian vampires, since being a vampire was understood as being infected by a virus, and thus these authors wanted to explore the idea of homosexuality and disease that was going on that time, especially female homosexuality and desire, which was understood as a contagious virus. I feel it's really interesting to analyze pieces of work because they tell us something about what's going on in the time they were written. Well, briefly introducing Carmilla, the action takes place in Austria. There, our protagonist, Laura, a narrator, lives in a castle with her father. Her father. At the age of 6 years old, Laura has her first encounter with Carmilla while she's dreaming, having a vision, or however you want to interpret it. 13 years later, Carmilla and her mother suffer from an accident that takes place very close to Laura's castle. Carmilla's mother then leaves her with Laura and her father so that she can get over. She's a really good mother, to be honest. So, during these meetings and reunions between both girls, a love story is developed. This love story ends up in tragedy, and I won't say more because I don't want to spoil you the ending, to be honest. But as I was saying before, vampires and them carrying a virus can be a metaphor of how Victorian society was so afraid to be infected or close to homosexuals. In other words, so you can all understand me, what I mean is that this story deals with repressed female homosexuality within the constrained Victorian society through a vampire story. So now I'm going to read you some of my favorite fragments of the story. Let's see what you think of it. I was flattered by the evident, though as yet undeserved, fondness she showed me. I liked the confidence with which she at once received me. She was determined that we should be very near friends. Next day came, and we met again. I was delighted with my companion, that is to say, in many respects. Her looks lost nothing in daylight. She was certainly the most beautiful creature I had ever seen, and the unpleasant remembrance of the face presented in my early dream had lost the effect of the first unexpected recognition. Sometimes, after an hour of apathy, my strange and beautiful companion would take my hand and hold it with a fond pressure, renewed again and again, blushing softly, gazing in my face with languid and burning eyes, and breathing so fast that her dress rose and fell with a tumultuous respiration. It was like the ardor of a lover. It embarrassed me. It was hateful and yet overpowering. And with gloating eyes, she drew me to her, and her hot lips traveled along my cheek in kisses. I have been in love with no one, and never shall, she whispered, unless it should be with you. How beautiful she looked in the moonlight. Oh, well, it is quite hard to think that in that time, 1872, like the 19th century, Le Fanu could write such a story with such an explicit lesbian sexuality. Well, now I am going to talk about a series that really put a mark on me, and I find it perfect to watch during this season or whenever you want. So, this series is The Haunting of Bly Manor, and actually the title of this podcast, The Moonflower, is based on the story within this series. So this series is available on Netflix, and it is based on the most famous ghost stories written by Henry James. The main one is called The Turn of the Screw, even if we see other links with other stories throughout the series, but this is the main one. It should be mentioned that this writer is neither romantic nor gothic, but actually modernist. James is actually one of the hardest writers to read. I swear, he's so hard to read. So this guy was obsessed with portraying how people get crazy by money, and most importantly, portraying toxic relationships. Obviously, money and toxic relationships are then a main target throughout this series because it is based on his writings. However, Mike Flanagan, the director of The Haunting of Bly Manor, gives us a more optimistic approach, suggesting us a healthy example of a relationship, which is actually the sapphic one. I am really happy for this because if you think about it, a great amount of the sapphic representation that we see on TV is always the lesbians who are the crazy, toxic people. But there is hope. Well, talking briefly about the story, the action takes place in England in 1987. Danny Clayton, our wonderful protagonist and heroine of the story, starts working as a governess in Bly Mansion. There, she takes care of two orphaned kids who are a little bit scary sometimes. So these are Flora and Miles. The thing is that there is a lovely, lovely, lovely and beautiful gardener whose name is Jamie and who really connects with Danny and who really sees Danny from the beginning. So they become friends. From friends to very good friends, and from very good friends to very intimate friends, and well, I'm not going to spoil it to you, but you know what I am talking about. If you want to witness a good love story that challenges the boundaries of relationships through a ghost love story, this is your series. So I'm leaving the trailer on the post so you can take a look at it. Now, I am in the need of talking to you about Ratched because I can't talk about sapphic horror without mentioning the wonderful Sarah Paulson. She's a queen. Honestly, I feel like half of Sarah's acting is her screaming. She's an icon. Well, coming back to Ratched, this series is based on Someone Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, especially Ratched's character. This 1962 polemic book deals with cruelties that were done in mental institutions. It should be mentioned that during the 20th century, LGBT people were put in there in order to be cured, quote unquote. And this is not very far from us because conversion therapy still exists in a great amount of countries. That is the real horrific story, terrifying. The thing is that this hospital is directed by the cruel and ironic nurse called Mildred Ratched. On this book, this lady thought that she did well to their patients by killing them and freeing them from their pain, quote unquote. There have been endless adaptations of this character, and the one I'm bringing you is the one by Ryan Murphy, Ratched. By the way, you can actually check it out on Netflix if you want to take a look. There was a time when Netflix did things right. Not now, I think. Well, with this version of the story that Sarah Paulson gives us, there is no better actress to do this role, I think. We witnessed the story of the nurse just before becoming the director of the mental institution. In particular, the story begins in 1947 in California, when this lady smartly gets a job as a nurse in that mental institution. This place is extremely unpleasant. We can see some doctors lobotomizing some patients and some nurses putting patients, specifically lesbians, inside boiling hot water in order to cure, quote unquote again, themselves from their homosexuality. Atrocious but representative of the non-so past society, to be honest. Well, the thing is that Ratched is hiding a lot of secrets. I mean, Ratched, the protagonist. One of them is that she is as lesbian as a muffin. But sure, one has to survive and cope with the society in which she lives in, I guess. Well, if you want to watch a psychological horror drama with sapphics on it, and played by the wonderful Sarah Paulson, this is the right series for you. Now, last but not least, I couldn't finish an episode about horror sapphic content without even mentioning American Horror Story. This series is also directed by the great Ryan Murphy. Thank you, Ryan Murphy. And we find Sarah Paulson being the protagonist in almost all of the stories that we are told. They're really good friends. I mean, a lesbian and a gay man, friends. And honestly, this is one of the scariest series I have ever watched in my life. It is true that I get scared by everything. Also, I have to say that Ryan Murphy, being a great ally of lesbians, always gives us a sapphic story during his series. First, I need to clarify the fact that within this series, each season follows a completely different story. For example, the first season is about an enchanted house, the second one about an asylum, the third one about a circus, the fourth one about a coven, the fifth one about a hotel. Lady Gaga is one of the protagonists in this season, and the reason why I started watching this series with my loving friend Ale. I love you, Ale. And so on. I wanted to focus on the second season, which is Asylum. Asylum is my favorite season and, in my opinion, the scariest one of all. It's so scary. Spoiler, it is also Sarah Paulson who has the leading role. She plays Lana Winters or Lana Banana, depending on whether you have watched this season or not. Apart from Sarah, we have an amazing cast with actors like Jessica Lange, yes, the one from King Kong, Evan Peters, Lily Rabe, Zachary Quinto, and so on. And I swear, if you are looking for something really scary, watch this, please. Focusing on the main action, Asylum's setting is a gloomy mental institution during the 60s. It is similar to the Ratchet one, but this one is even more scary. This institution is directed by Jessica's character, Sister Jude, and Monsignor Timothy O'Hara. Also, we have Dr. Threadson. This good-looking guy doesn't share the institution's methods, but he has quite a lot to hide, so be careful, mind yourself. The conflict starts when a journalist, Lana, or Sarah Paulson, visits this center accompanied by her girlfriend. Yes, she's a lesbian. In order to investigate an important event. And live, she ends up being accused of being a lesbian and being put as a patient in the center. Yes, she's enclosed in a mental institution for being a lesbian. Murphy is pretty obsessed with portraying these kinds of stories. Very intense, terrifying, and historic, to be honest. So I am leaving on this post the trailers of each series, so you can take a look at them. Well, I am actually a little bit scared to death, so I am going to let you go now. I hope that you find these recommendations to be useful and that they help you spend this day with more fear. So enjoy your day, hope all goes well, and see you soon!